Thank you for inviting me to record a message for this session ahead of the IFLA Congress. I officially took my position as CEO of the British Library in January of this year, and both Leslie and Vicki have made me feel immediately welcome by the library community. The British Library is actively taking part in several IFLA groups, and I will be attending the Congress this summer with 5 of my colleagues to demonstrate our commitment to support the work that IFLA has been doing in bringing library and information workers together to mobilise, cooperate and innovate right across the world. One of our values at the British Library is to collaborate more than we can do by ourselves, and Vicki's presidency of IFLA has been a great example of collaborating with the IFLA community to support the values and missions of IFLA. In particular, that building closer and more transparent connections between board and membership. I would like to personally thank her for her remarkable work. The British Library is an intrinsically international organisation for so many reasons. Custodians to major collections from around the world, 170 million collection items spanning 2 millennia of human thought and expression in over 200 languages and a myriad of formats. And as a major national institution, we value our peer network with libraries and archives around the world. We value our partnerships. We value our professional exchanges with you and others. We value the knowledge exchange on protection of our collections and preservation, both physically and digitally. This is a core part of who we are. The world continues to be an unstable and unpredictable place. The information landscape is changing quickly, and we're living with the global issues of misinformation and cyber threats. National libraries have a vital role to play here. We need to continue to be a trusted source of information and knowledge for people around the world. That's not something national libraries can do alone. I can't, hence the importance of international collaborations and partnerships. Our many partners around the world are so valuable to the work we do. They open up new opportunities, they bring new skills and knowledge to every project. One example of this is our network of Endangered Archives Programmes Hub with Jadavapur University, the National University of Lesotho, the American University in Beirut, the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Peru, and the University of the West Indies Mona Library. Together, we've co-designed and delivered over 40 webinars and nearly 15 on-site workshops covering topics such as digitisation, collections care, conservation, cataloguing and metadata, to protect archives under threat around the world. National libraries, like IFLA itself, have a convening power through their own country. We can share with you how we do this in the UK through our Living Knowledge Network, and we would love to hear from you how you do that and bring your partners and your national libraries together throughout your country. Our Living Knowledge Network delivers a programme of touring exhibitions, public events and training for librarians. In a recent survey, 92% of these members all around the country already have plans or expected to continue working with partners in future, showing the values of such partnerships.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to session 2 of Stronger, Bolder Together. This is a new session format which President-elect Leslie Weir and I are presenting. So good morning, Leslie. How are you today?
Why, good afternoon, Vicki. I'm great. And as I think many know, I'm Leslie Weir. I'm the Librarian and Archivist of Canada, and as Vicki mentioned, in the role of President-elect.
So it's fantastic to see people joining us from across the globe today. I can see that we have colleagues from New Zealand, Peru, United States and Italy. So please do put into the chat where you're joining us from. It's fantastic to see the global coverage that we have. As I mentioned, this is our second session of Stronger, Bolder Together, and it's a topic that Leslie and I thought was really important to bring together, and we've got these 2 sessions this week, and then we'll continue at Astana as well. And really what it is about bringing together our presidential themes. My presidential theme, of course, is Stronger Together, and it really recognises the strength and the strong outcomes that we can have for the organisations, the communities we serve, but also our federation when we work together as colleagues, as a profession, but also in our wider ecosystem with our publishers, our and bookshops and everyone like that, but also broader organisations in our communities. So that strength of working together, and we've just heard from Rebecca Lawrence, partnerships and the importance of partnerships as well. So that's really been a theme throughout many of the discussions I've had across the last 2 years. But Leslie, do you want to share with us what your presidential theme will be?
Well, I think we will all continue to be stronger together and building on the work that you've done during your presidency, Vicki. And at the same time, I think we're going to look at how we can be stronger together to be bold. I think libraries need to really step up, and we need to take the role that we should have in society. And we are living in rather challenging times. And I think it's a moment for IFLA as an association and for our member national library associations and all of us in terms of the roles we play in the library sector to look at how we can step up and be bold.
It's a fantastic theme. So well done, Leslie. And I think it's really going to lead us into some good discussions. And I think also sets a great context for the discussion we're going to have today. Before we get into the discussion, though, I just wanted to touch quickly on the IFLA trend report. Of course, IFLA has been producing trend reports since 2013, but the latest trend report was released in September last year, and it was our first major review of the trend report. And it really looks at knowledge and information and where libraries want to position themselves in that context in the future. It's a great discussion starter, and it's certainly a document that I've used a lot within my organisation when we're looking to the future, and particularly in our strategic planning processes. I'll just go quickly through the trends. I know many of you will be familiar with them, but it's just to touch on them quickly. So trend 1 is around knowledge practices are changing. There's new ways to create and share information, but of course the impact of misinformation and disinformation needs to be considered as well. Trend 2, of course, any discussion today always includes AI and how other technologies are transforming society. Trend 3 is around trust is being renegotiated, and it's really around the declining trust in organisations and governments across the globe, but also the impact of large conglomerates controlling our news, but also the declining local news. And I know in Australia, many local newspapers in small communities are closing, and the impact that has on recording history, but also sharing information in communities. Trend 4 is around skills and abilities are becoming more complex. New skills are required in this new world. 5 is around digital technologies are unevenly distributed, and of course that brings in the digital divide is continuing to deepen and all the issues that go with that. Trend 6 is information systems are using more resources, and this picks up our concerns around the impact of climate change and the fact that many of these systems that we have use so much energy. And there's lots of discussion in this trend around e-waste as well. And then trend 7, I think, is the complete opposite of technology. And it's really around people are seeking community connections. They're seeking spaces where they can come together to share just being in the same space, but also to share resources. We're also seeing the growth of online communities, but also the important role that libraries play as community catalysts. So the trend report, of course, has so much more in it, and it is a fantastic document to use as a tool. And our thanks to Professor Michael Deswani and Dr. Kim Osman from the Queensland University of Technology for providing that report. And of course, it is available on the IFLA website with some supporting documentation as well. So Leslie, when you started, you talked about it being a time to be bold. So would you like to share with our colleagues what really prompted us to have these conversations?
Well, I think that we felt it was very important that we have continuity running through our presidencies so that we can build on each other's work. At the same time, we know that the world is changing. Libraries are dealing with many of the challenges that they've had over the last decade, but they have a lot of new challenges. And we have a rather volatile geopolitical situation. We know that libraries have many, many values in common, they also have cultures and histories that can be very different depending on the region that they are in and the communities that they're supporting. And I think that we felt that bringing together, working together, and being bold will enable libraries to take their place on the global stage and really support society through these volatile times that we're currently living through. And as Vicki mentioned, we're starting with these 2 sessions. We've got an opportunity to come together in Astana, and we'll talk more about that later. And then we're looking at doing a follow-up virtual session so that we can maintain the momentum in terms of IFLA going forward and really supporting the global library community.
It's certainly so many issues to be across at the moment, and really the important role that libraries can play as well, which is probably a great segue to introducing our special guest today, David Lang, who is the Virginia and Charles Bowden Professor of Librarianship at the University of Texas at Austin. So welcome, David. Fantastic to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And of course, I've got David's book here. So just to prove that I've got it, I ordered it online from Amazon and it came very quickly. And really, I think the topics that Leslie's just talked about, David, are certainly what you're thinking and writing about. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about what prompted the book and where you're going with some of those ideas?
Yeah, so it's really been thinking over a year about sort of 3 themes that I think are linked together. And I think they connect very much into the themes of both presidencies and particularly about being bolder. I was struck by, in the United States, we have this really interesting demographic phenomenon occurring, which is for the first time in almost 100 years, we're finding that people are dying younger. And when we look into why that's happening, we find that it's a segment of the population that does not have access to higher education. That's usually not a question of merit, but a question of economy. And that leads to a whole line of things where people feel disenfranchised in their ability to participate and have a say. And unfortunately, that means that oftentimes they turn to things like drugs, alcohol, and suicide. And this is an area in which libraries can, I think, play a really strong role, not simply in serving communities, but literally saving lives by creating a power for people to feel like they have a voice and to participate in their own economy, their own community, etc. So that was one theme. And when you look at some of, and as you 2 have just beautifully pointed out, and you did it so delicately as not to point out my country in particular, when you look at some of the disruption occurring internationally, there are major disruptions that fit into that, looking at some of those themes. And so one of those themes is AI. I'm really interested in AI and how AI leads to something called corrosive AI, that is quick distrust of institutions and organizations. And we're seeing that all the time with AI slop, and the idea that AI is good enough now to make you begin to doubt just about everything you see. And that's very different than how we used to think about misinformation and information literacy. With information literacy, we wanted people to sort of get through their lives, but every so often get really skeptical and go and interrogate whether this was real. What does it mean when you live in a time when everything is potentially false, misleading, or full of or created? So how do we deal with communities that are already feeling disaffected suddenly in a situation where a lot of the grounding of things that they used to understand and believe in begin to dissolve, and what do they turn to in that case? And finally, looking at the role of libraries and librarians in that, which is, this is a task that we can take on. This is something where we can have specific and recordable and statistically proven results in bringing people and connecting them and demonstrating joy in information and in the service to those folks. And I think many years ago, and I have to say, I was a visiting fellow at the National Library of Canada back in the day, and worked with Francine Gaudette and some amazing librarians there. And one of the quotes that we used to use was, "Be brave, be bold, and be right." Be brave, and that these are amazing times, and it's time for us to jump in. It's time for us to stop worrying about what our role is and start taking and defining a role, that we move ahead. And so we need to be brave in those, and that we need to be bold, looking beyond simply what kinds of things we can do with a collection or in a building, but look at how we can reach out. I'm thinking about the Topeka, Kansas Public Library that looked at building information literacy, and they found out they didn't have enough librarians, so they trained community volunteers. They found out that the literacy issue was not so much near the building, so they got buses and drove everyone into the inner city of Tacoma to begin working on literacy and engagement. So it's being bold and thinking big and thinking different communities. And finally, we have to be right. That means that we don't do these things just simply because it's a fad or it's something we thought of today or et cetera, but we have to spend the time to assess and evaluate whether that's what we're doing a good job, to think systemically. And I'm really concerned, for example, about the level and intensity of the scholarship that we have available to us within library science, and how can we really invite scholars to come in and work at their highest level and how we do these things. So that's a long way of then wrapping it up into a book and saying here, but that's sort of why it's called triptych. It's that issue of moving from serving to saving, dealing with issues such as AI and joy, and then finally, what's the role of a librarian, which includes how do we define librarians, because it's not always by a piece of paper they receive from a university.
Yeah, and so many people in our libraries today are not librarians, and I think that's what makes us such a richer organisation, is the depth and breadth of who is in our organisations. That's certainly a lot covered in that, David, but what we're keen to have some interaction with our audience. So we're going to have our first poll, and it's a quick question. So what are the biggest challenges facing your library today? So invite you to use the Menti code and give us some idea of what's impacting your library today. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, that's a great motto: be brave, be bold, be right. And I think that's certainly something we can come back to in the discussion as well.
Yeah, and as people are answering the question, maybe I'll just add, David, what you said has resonated so much with me. And recently there was a poll done in Canada, and Toronto was identified as being the loneliest city in Canada. And actually, the loneliest generation are the people who are sort of 18 to 30. And that loneliness is something that our libraries are really grappling with in terms of how we can support people in not being lonely, because loneliness creates many health risks.
And this is where we have to be really careful in how we look at this. For example, loneliness, we did some looking into the loneliness issue and the loneliness epidemic, and the issue we found is more social disconnection than loneliness, right? Loneliness is an emotion, and it can be very positive. In other words, if you feel lonely, that may push you to go out and create social connections, right? And there are always going to be people who are lonely, and we know that that works throughout life, right? When you move to a new city, you feel lonely, you've disconnected from a network. When you sometimes when you have children and early children, you get disconnected from a social network. And so that's something that absolutely libraries can be a part of, taking loneliness as an impetus to connect and connecting, and differentiating that from solitude, which is people that really just don't need a lot of people. And I think that what we need to make sure that where libraries can really join this conversation is, how do we use loneliness to transform into participation? In other words, it's not just about a lot of people who have a lot of friends can feel disconnected from their ability to shape and work in their society. And so we need to empower people, not just connect them, but then to use that connection so they feel like they have a positive impact in their local communities, whether that's in politics or volunteering or business or what have you. And when you look across the world, libraries are the organization that are really, in these times of, frankly, chaos, well situated and stable to do that kind of work. So Leslie, I agree with you completely. We have now is a special time to be part of that.
So we've got a few things coming up around some consistency, the book banning, budget funding, which certainly came through in Monday's session as well, government interference, which I think would probably lead to intellectual freedom. Those sorts of challenge is what that's referring to as well. But also advocacy, which will come up later in our session as well. So thank you for adding, giving us your comments there. And it's good we'll be tracking these across the sessions that we have as well, just to see what comes up and the consistency. But as I said, we did invite a number of leaders to respond to the question of what does the world today need from its libraries. And of course, at the commencement of the session, we heard from Rebecca Lawrence, the Chief Executive at British Library. But we've also invited Sam Helmick, President of the American Library Association, to respond to this question. So let's hear from Sam.
Hello, I'm Sam Helmick, President-elect of the American Library Association. Around the world, libraries are doing something extraordinary, something that is often overlooked precisely because it works so well. Libraries are among the few institutions that continue to operate with integrity and impact across borders, disciplines, and divides. They protect truth, fuel education, foster innovation, and hold community together. In rural towns and refugee camps, on city corners and university campuses, in prison libraries and mobile book bikes, this work is everywhere. In Kenya, a library teaches digital literacy skills to girls who are the first in their family to go online. In Colombia, libraries staff trek into remote mountains to bring books and solar-powered tablets to communities with no roads. In Ukraine, libraries have become places of shelter, communication, and resistance. And in the United States, libraries offer citizenship classes, job training, and safe spaces for our seniors. And yet, when things function so smoothly, when access is seamless and solutions are quietly delivered, the work often becomes invisible. Success, especially in libraries, hides in plain sight. This is why advocacy is not important. It is essential. Because storytelling comes with understanding, and with understanding comes support. Libraries have always known how to build community. Now we must help the world understand that we are a community worth building with. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And of course, I think Sam has picked up beautifully a number of points that you made already, David, in today's session around the importance of integrity, impact of libraries. Advocacy is essential, but also I love the point storytelling. With storytelling comes understanding. And I think when I first listened to her video, what really resonated with me and I reflected on is your essay around from serving to saving. And I think, you know, Sam's picked up a few of the points as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the from serving to saving, just what the intent of that essay is?
Well, it's the idea, and once again, a brilliant video, because I think she demonstrates the idea of shifting from what we can do in our buildings and what we do as sort of how we're defined as librarians to the notion of having positive social impact. And that means partnering with not only having libraries in prisons, but partnering with the prisons so that those libraries have some utility. One of the things we have, once again, in the US is sometimes we have prison libraries where the collections are so absolutely filtered's not the right word, censored, that they don't necessarily have great utility within them. But we're working with prisons to understand where are we going. One of the programs I love from several years ago in the Cuyahoga County Public Library in Ohio and in the US was they had a partnership between the prison library and the public library, because then when prisoners would leave the prison, they would go in and their number one problem was housing, and their number one problem was back to social isolation. They sort of had someone they could talk to. They had someone who could help them find places to live. It became a system of re-empowering that individual to be part of the community that they want to be part of. And so I think we see that on and on again. And it is this idea that I love how she put it beautifully about, you know, hiding in plain sight, and the good work that we do is often invisible. And back to your point about advocacy, which is we need to not only have the positive effect, but frankly, we need to be seen having that positive effect so that people understand that there is work. One of the things that I always cringe at is whenever I hear people talking about how public libraries in particular are free, and I say they're absolutely not free. You already paid for them. They're free to use at point of sale, if you will. But, you know, taxes are important for doing that. Legislation is important for doing that. And what we're seeing now with disruptions in the EU, what we're seeing in disruptions in the United States is how the policy and political structures of these systems matter, right? We've always sort of ignored them, but it's actually really beneficial right now in the United States that all our public library laws are state-based and all our funding is almost always very hyper-local based, as opposed to something when a change may occur in the Netherlands, which has a public library law that has this sort of trickle-down effect in terms of how much funding is available. So we need to pay attention to that just as much as we need to pay attention to the collection and pay attention to the resources that we may provide. We really need to look at the impact that we're having on lives.
I think too, I mean, a lot of the conversation often focuses on public libraries, but so many of these issues impact every library. We all have communities that we are serving, and it's important that we are able to advocate to all our communities and the importance of libraries as well. And I think you do make that comment in your book as well about everybody has a community and they're part of different communities as well. We do have another quick poll that we wanted to launch, and it really picks up on Sam's idea of being advocacy, being able to tell the stories, share the impact, and it's a scale of I think we were asking people to. I think you can actually use the bar to indicate where on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to explain why libraries matter, and how ready are you to explain why intellectual freedom matters?
Vicki, while they're doing that, can I just jump in really quickly? Because I'm talking to the head of two very important organizations that actually suffer the transparency. Good work is hiding in plain sight problem. I mean, I look at what's going on in Queensland, I look at what's going on in Canada, you look at what's going on in the Netherlands, you look at what's going on in South Korea, and the frontline libraries, public libraries are doing amazing work, but the support agencies that sit behind them, that fund them, that do the research, that do the training, that do the connection, that send out the services, are essential to what we know. And oftentimes, even within the field, we don't clearly understand those roles and how they play them. And I think this is where IFLA in particular is an excellent organization to highlight that sort of institutional power. But also to your point, you know, when I mentioned before about this deaths of despair, there's the concept is people who did not have access to higher education. Well, that means that university librarians and academic librarians are also dealing with people who can barely afford what they're doing at couch surfing instead of being able to afford their tuition, how they come out with debt in certain countries, et cetera, how they know they're accessible. And so you're right, it is absolutely, it's the state library, it's the national library, it's the itty bitty tiniest 3-person branch library, it's the online librarian, et cetera. We all need to be working together so that we all can answer the question of why libraries matter and why intellectual freedom matter in all of those different venues.
Well, we've got the scores there for the 2 questions, which are, I guess, they're quite high. So I think that is encouraging as well, and something for us to reflect on. But Leslie, do you want to introduce our next guest speaker?
Sure, happy to do that. So we're going to be playing a video by Masood Kokar, a university librarian and keeper of the Brotherton collection at Leeds and Chief Digital Information Officer. So I'll turn things over to Masood.
We're living in highly volatile times. Major global conflicts continue all around us. Attacks on knowledge and our information infrastructures grow more blatant by the day. Rapid technological advances reshape how we connect, learn, and think. At the same time, the very idea of what counts as knowledge is under fire. From generative AI reshaping what it means to develop knowledge, to the wildfire spread of misinformation and disinformation eroding trust in our institutions. This is where libraries and librarians must step up. Despite the noise and uncertainty, librarians remain one of the most trusted professions on the planet. Knowledge management is our core business, curating, preserving, and connecting people with reliable information. But trust alone is not enough. We must seize this moment. While we are required to confront unprecedented challenges, within them also lie unprecedented opportunities. By forging new partnerships across borders and disciplines, we can build resilience into our systems. Whether collaborating with tech innovators to develop open source AI curation tools, or teaming up with community activists to reclaim public spaces as reading rooms, our strength comes from creative thinking and unity. It's time to experiment. Pilot projects that challenge traditional library services, like pop-up digital labs, mobile makerspaces in rural communities, AI literacy workshops for our local communities, show that when we think big, we ignite imagination and transform lives. No library stands alone. Let's share our learnings openly, amplify each other's successes and failures, and build a global network of radical innovation and collaboration. In doing so, we discover that our collective impact is greater than the sum of our individual efforts. I invite you to imagine walking into a library where a user tests an AI-driven search assistant to find primary sources in seconds, where a student learns to distinguish fact from fiction through immersive digital storytelling, where communities gather not only for books and resources, but for intergenerational exchange and community building. These are not distant dreams. They are the future that we can create. So, my provocation to you is simple. Reimagine your role. From gatekeepers of knowledge to designers of experiences, from curators of archives to facilitators of digital citizenship. Be bold. Take risks. Embrace failure. Iterate quickly. And share your insights with the world. Experiment more. Prototype new services. Test unconventional partnerships. And challenge the boundaries of what a library can be. Build confidence. Invest in continuous learning. Master new tools, methodologies, and mindsets. Act urgently. The world won't wait. Each day, misinformation grows. Each day, new technologies reshape our reality. I hope this message inspires you to acquire the skills that are needed, along with the courage and the conviction to transform our libraries and, in turn, our world. Thank you.
Well, so Mahmoud is certainly challenging us, and I think he's picked up on many of the themes that David is exploring, but certainly pushing us to be innovative, to look at new ways to connect, new ways to learn, to think, and even new definitions of what knowledge is. And at the same time, looking at being bold, embracing success, embracing failure, experimenting, testing, investing in learning, and doing it in a bold way, not quietly in the background. So, David, do you want to jump in and give us some of your thoughts in relation to Mahmoud and his video?
It's once again, you got a fabulous video and I mean, radical innovation. The idea of creative thinking and unity. It's time to experiment. Gatekeepers to designers of experience. I mean, yay, all of those. And I think of Jean Tan in Singapore and the idea of the sort of fourth generation of libraries and libraries as generative spaces. I'm thinking of the Read Arts Foundation in South Korea that's working on sort of teen and tween spaces about how they sort of work and build cultures and everything from let's try putting books on trains and subways to let's build spaces that only the teens and tweens can get into and such. It's just, we have a lot of really good innovation occurring, and bringing that together and sharing it and trying it. And the two things that I think, though, we have to remember, libraries have always been good about being connected and sharing things. I think, unfortunately, where we need to be in is it's that experiment word, because it's not just saying, hey, it worked here, try it there. Libraries need to begin to think increasingly about how do we adapt innovation and not adopt innovation. I think that when we look at a lot of what library organizations around the world have done, it's almost all around standardization. We brought people together to come up with what we did in common and standardize it, whether that's how we label books in classification and subject analysis, whether that's service and performance standards and what we count, et cetera. When we talked about standards, MARC standards, and now we're talking about bib frame. And a lot of this was trying to take all of this innovation, come together and come up with a toolkit that people could adopt. And I think what we're seeing now that we have a strong technical base already. That work has helped us now move to the next step, the bolder step, if you will. Leslie, I'm just going to keep bothering you on that because it's brilliant. About now, what does that allow us to do in a crazy, cool way? Where the network isn't about coming together to standardize stuff. The network is about to communicate innovation and what we've tried. It's a constant learning network that we come into to say, has anyone faced this situation? What'd you do? Okay, how do I do that? How does that fit in my world? And so my job as a librarian isn't to pull the standard off the shelf and put it in place. It's to take the standards there and say, all right, that worked in Calgary, but I'm not sure it's going to work in Cairns. And I'm not sure that's going to work in Texas. But there's something there, right? We listed a whole list of, maker spaces and where they are. Well, maker spaces are great, but sometimes people need basic literacy services. Okay. But the idea from idea of a resource into implementation, right? Well, someone's going to take that and create a 3D model, but someone can take that and write their own book. Someone can take that and use AI to generate a comic book that's based on it, et cetera. So the idea is what we share and how we talk about it, and then which of these worked. I always have my regular, here are the terms I'd like to get rid of today. The number one being customer. The number two, though, is toolkit. If we could never use the word toolkit again and call it a starter kit, right? Because it's meant to start you down the path, not to be implemented as a sort of IKEA flat box issue. We need to move from standardizing the stuff we do to standards that allow us to communicate the differences that we do. And once again, experiment. And that's where I think that, putting a critical eye towards my field, which is, the library science professor and faculty member, and I know we have a few of those on here. Our job is to study it, analyze it, publish it, but also interrogate it critically. We need to go beyond. I did a survey of 15 people, and this is what I found in the case study, and actually look at large scale, how do we implement this? But really, we spend a lot of time worrying about how we get services transmitted through our informal networks and formal networks around the globe, how we get materials shared. We need to increasingly look at how we get ideas and people shared through that network, that we can, because it's just as easy to reach out and say, Vicki, how did this work in Queensland? Okay, all right, what's the difference here? All right, our funding's different, and how do we work in these different environments? And so this is exactly where we need to be. And there's a horrible phrase, which is, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. I certainly feel that in the US, we're in the midst of a crisis. And I know we're not alone when we talk about an assault on knowledge, because it's not just, we can talk about book banning, we can talk about censorship, we can talk about a horrific ruling of the Fifth Circuit of Appeals on what is government speech. But really, it's that plus attacks on universities, attacks on public distribution of information, taking down government-generated resources that are used. We're taking down the things that we use to critically analyze and look at us as a society and say, whoop, this is a critical issue, this is a critical issue. And so for me, it comes back to, how do we form partnerships across that spectrum? Not just let's hunker down. How do we take Columbia and Harvard and have them talk with Oxford and have them talk with the Austin Independent School District and talk to, right? How do we build those kind of partnerships? public AI is an initiative that came out of Oxford, and they said, we want to build a public AI infrastructure. And so they started talking to Library of Congress and sort of the standard parties because they wanted materials to train the AI on. And when we talked to them, I said, that's not the resource you want from us. The resource you want from us is you want Diane Connery sitting in Pottsboro, Texas, population 2,000, who has the trust of her community and a community that looks to her to help them adjust to this new world and say, how can AI benefit these people? What is the potential downside of it? How do we build trust within that system? I said, that's much more valuable than the 28th copy of the Chaucer novel that we have. And that's back to the people and thinking boldly and thinking about the resources we bring. You guys have to stop me because, you give
No.
Professor time, we take it.
And in your book, you do talk about AI, joy, and connectedness, which is really what you've just been talking about. And there were so many different issues that Mahmoud brought up in his video. But one of the practical challenges that libraries are dealing with is just how they do approach the use of AI in their libraries. And maybe you'd like to say just a couple of words on that, and then we've got a bit of a poll to get a feel in terms of how people are feeling about the use of AI in their libraries.
I think that we need to, the first thing we need to do is clarify our language. For example, AI literacy almost always, as it's been used in different venues and different disciplines, is how do we use AI, right? Training and what's the technique, and give them some standards and frameworks. I much prefer AI readiness, which is the readiness to talk about this issue. We did a study on AI readiness at the Austin Public Library here in Texas, and I'll tell you, we asked the question sort of, how are you using AI, et cetera. The best comment we got back on the survey, I can't say in polite company, but let's just say it started with the letter F and ended with UT for asking these questions. There's real passion around this issue. And when we met with librarians and we met with them, they're kind of like, all right, we know you're just here. UT is being brought in to make us use this stuff. And we said, no, we're here to figure out what's going on. And they said, we've seen people, they literally in Austin, right, the Apple campus, we've seen people who have been laid off because of AI come into our libraries. We've seen that price. We have seen these tools just come up with stupid answers. We've had people walk up to the reference desk not only looking for books that don't exist, but looking for services that it says that we offer that we never do, right? We've seen the cost of these things, and we've seen wonderful benefits from them as well. How are we ready to have that conversation? How are we ready to talk about, right? The other thing, we tend to talk about generative AI, which some people say isn't really AI because it's just word matching and letter matching. That's different than what you get when you're doing your fitness and looking at mammograms and other forms of AI. Is this the right way? And we're spending billions of dollars in the economy of it. The point is, I know that the folks who are pushing AI literacy see those advantages. They also see the challenges. But right now, the tone is very much on how to adopt. And I think it needs to be much more on how do we influence this conversation and where does it fit? We're not quite ready to the all in. One last point. However, anyone who walks into the door of someone, I'll just choose Queensland, Canada, and the United States for a moment, their priority of having their lives affected by AI, whether they were tracked and surveilled by everything from a government issued camera to someone's doorbell. How they came in, did they get their resume when they were applying for a job? Did a human ever look at it? Did a human produce it? Did the loan come through? Was the loan ever looked at by a human or not? If we don't understand that AI is already having impact in today's world and the people we seek to serve, then if we're making this serve to save, we are ignoring a significant impact. And it really has come to that level.
So let's just jump into our last poll, and we're just going to ask 3 quick questions about AI and give people a chance. So our questions are, how far do you think that AI is an opportunity for your library on a scale of 1 to 10? How far do you intentionally experiment with AI in your work, 1 to 10? And how ready do you feel to explain AI to your users and community? And we've already got a number of people jumping in. And as I guess we can give people a few minutes to complete the poll and raise any other points we feel we should in relation to this as we get ready to just look as well at what the conversation should actually be amongst us in the sector, in the profession. And I think, David, you've raised some really key points that will get people thinking.
Well, so then let me turn the tables, if I may. Once again, I have two people leading what I think are outstanding library organizations. What do you see the role of those organizations at the national level, at the state level? What do you see your role in terms of AI at this point? Not realizing the informed second by second, but I'm just curious how you're thinking about it.
Well, certainly at Libraries and Archives Canada, we have experimented with AI and using it for certain initiatives, and they've been very successful. You know, we were able to digitize and build the indexes. Transcribe in terms of the 1931 census that were released in 2023. And normally we would take years to build the indexes on what we had transcribed humanly. And in fact, the work was able to be done in a few weeks, and we were able to have every single field indexed. And so it's a richness of information that's available to people. At the same time, we're having a great deal of discussions and debates about how to ensure that the AI tools we use in our business are trained ethically, and that we're looking at the impact that these kind of tools have on society and the role we have to play in terms of sort of the safety and security of the people that make up society. So looking at that balance between how you can leverage some fairly powerful tools, understanding that they do have a negative impact on the economy, the environment, in terms of the power that they require, and like how you would use them smartly rather than just use them indiscriminately. And then trying to look at working with the federal government of Canada as they develop, you know, their approaches in terms of what would be considered to be ethical use of AI, you know, within a federal government context as well. And then looking at working in collaboration with libraries and archives who are wrestling with all of these questions.
Right. Vicki, I'm thinking about when we heard about experimenting and such, and I'm thinking about the Soldier's Diary AI system that you put together, which I still think is a fabulous experiment, but I think it captured some imagination and use. But so I didn't mean to jump in. But
I mean, Virtual Veterans is a product that you're talking about. It's been a great success for us. But I should say we also learned a lot from it. Things went pear-shaped in the first 24 hours, where we had people come in and intentionally disrupt the code and things like that, I think called jailbreak. But we learned from that. We put things in place. It has been a quite successful at enabling our World War I materials to be accessible in a new way, and also links to the Australian curriculum, so students are using it in their studies as well. But I think what importantly about that, when we introduced it and we told our library board that we wanted to use this Gen AI approach, they were insistent that we put a policy in place, that we were quite clear around how we were going to use Gen AI, that we advise people. So we've got that framework in place. And I think many of the things that Leslie talked about, we're doing as well. At the moment, we're very focused on how we have our staff building their skills, their knowledge and awareness around AI, and how we can start experimenting in different ways with AI, but also building our capability and our awareness. And I think that's really puts us in a position then to be having the conversations with our community around the use of AI as well. So I think, you know, it's certainly something we're thinking about. On the other side, we like everyone, we've seen in the feedback today, we've got budget cuts. We've got to think about how we can work smarter. So we're intentionally thinking about, can we use AI in different ways to actually on some of our work processes and things like that. So we're looking at it in lots of different ways, but certainly thinking about having an awareness of any risks and the ethics issues and things like that. But of course, I guess recognise that there's so much we don't know. I think is the other big issue that we're certainly thinking about.
And I think we're seeing that reflected in the results from the survey that we just did. When you look at the distribution in terms of the 3 questions that we've asked. And so, you know, this is obviously an area where we can work together, as Mahmoud suggested, and look at supporting each other in terms of working through some of these questions in our organizations, and also being sure that the people working in our libraries do themselves understand AI and the potential benefits, the potential risks, and the opportunities.
So I think we could, oh yeah, we are close. So we're coming towards the end of the hour. So I guess it's an opportunity to reflect on across the whole session. We had Rebecca Lawrence from British Library open our discussion and talks a lot about the importance of partnership, collaboration, and of course she's talking from one of the great libraries of the world, the British Library, and I think we all look to the British Library to see what they're doing at different times. But I think she also talked about the importance of learning from each other, working together, and that's also been a theme across the session. Leslie, any reflections from you on any of the speakers as well?
Well, I'm still reeling with everything I've heard. I'm feeling like I'm in some ways in information overload. I think certainly from Sam Helmick, really just also leveraging that question of advocacy and the importance of people actually understanding the impact of what we do and what we contribute and how we can help save society. So I think that was very impactful coming from Sam. And then, of course, Mahmoud had so many different points in terms of how we can innovate and how we can work together, also leveraging partnerships to really, start questioning a lot of what we do, but looking at how we can create opportunities. And I'll turn it back to you, Vicki, because I think we also would like to acknowledge the incredible contributions that David's made through this.
Absolutely. I think, David, it's been fantastic to have you here. But I just one of the comments that Masood made that we haven't explored is he talked about reimagining our role and from gatekeeper to knowledge to designer to experiences, which I particularly liked. Like I know in our organisational structure, we now have an executive responsible for experience within our organisation. So, I think back 20 years ago, our structure was so traditional. We had the corporate services, the collections, and maybe one other thing. But now we have a whole portfolio of people focused on the experience that people have when they come to their library, and recognising that it's much more than books. It's the activities, the connections, how people engage with each other as well. And I think would be a really great topic to explore another time as well. But I just wanted to bring that out because we hadn't discussed that at all. David, your reflections across the whole session?
It's so refreshing to have an organization like IFLA talk and put right up front the idea of radical innovation, the idea of fostering it, the idea of experimentation, being bold and being of service. And so, one, thank you for letting me be a part of that. But I think we do have a global network now, and it's not equitable and it's not even across, but there's connection there. And being able to share people with resources, people without, people under fire, with people who are in comfortable environments, people are rebuilding trust, people hold trust. Those are the things that we should be sharing as much of, frankly, more than here's how we did this, here's how this works. And so continuing this conversation of the network and really lifting up the people the librarians, and lifting up librarians regardless of whether they have a degree or not, whether they, it's what do they bring that helps our communities. I still go back to Marie Ostergaard, who's the director of the Aarhus Library in Denmark, who really came up with this lovely phrase of the library as a movement. And it's the only, as I said, it's the only context in which I like the word user in library land, which is that the library is this platform. It's got space, it's got stuff, it's got trust, it's got institution, it's got regulation. But libraries and the community are users of the library. Librarians and the community are users of that library to get something done. So a librarian may be partnering with a community member simply to answer a simple question, to learn a new technology, or they may be creating a whole new lunch program, welcoming new citizens programs. They may be trying out and bringing connections to small itty bitty Western far-reaching parts of Australia, right? That idea that the library is a mechanism to create connectivity, and from that economic development, and from that empowerment and innovation, and from that engagement, it starts with librarians who are willing to stand up and say, I am the value in this organization. When I go into a prison library, it's not just that we now have a librarian, so it's a check mark. That librarian goes in and says, these are the kinds of resources that these people need. This is the kind of connectivity. This is how we prevent recidivism. This is how we provide justice. This is how, when we move into the smallest schools, we know that whether, a zip code should not determine your future economic prosperity. We know that the first 3,000 hours of a child's life and how much they're exposed to reading and literacy is going to determine where they are at grade 3. Where their reading level is at grade 3 is going to determine their ability to graduate from high school, and their ability to graduate from high school determines whether they're going to be incarcerated in the United States. We have this sort of direct linkage that we see. And the people who are at that point to discover those layers, discover those levers, those major milestones, to then act upon those milestones, those are what librarians do. Whether those librarians came through a university program, whether those librarians used to work in commercials and advertising, whether those librarians came from the tech sector, whether they are people who don't declare that they're librarians, but they want to support librarians in all ways. And it begins with being bold enough to ask that question, to understanding your value and an advocate to demonstrate why answering that question, partnering with the librarian, will make the world a better place. And by God, I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, you still want to turn the world to a better place. And so if we can start with that level of commonality, we can then begin solving not only the problems that come into our building, but increasingly those that surround the buildings, and increasingly surround the cities that those buildings in, and universities around the buildings, and take the network of advocates and individuals who want to make the world a better place. And by God, we're going to make the world a better place, and it's world domination through librarianship. It's all good.
Well, excellent, fantastic. Thank you. It's been fantastic to have you, David, but I can see we've got lots of questions just coming through in the chat. We will be putting the videos up on the IFLA website, so everyone will be able to access them again. In Monday's session, we did have Sherpong from National Library Board of Singapore, who we've talked about today, the great innovative work that they do, and Sherpong talked about that. And we also had Pilar Martinez from Edmonton Public Library as well on Monday. So those two videos will go up in addition to the videos today. Stephen's also put in the chat some of the links, a link to one of your blogs as well, David. But of course, David's blogs are very easy to find on the website as well, on his websites as well. Just a reminder too that these were sort of launchpad sessions, just conversation starters, and that we will actually be continuing the conversation at IFLA, the World Library and Information Congress, Astana. First up will be the President's session on Wednesday, the 20th of August at 9 a.m. With the theme of Stronger, Bolder Together. And then you come in, Leslie.
Yes, and so the President-elect session will be on Thursday, August 21st at 1:30, and we are going to be being bold.
Fantastic. So it's a great theme, Leslie. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with that over the next 2 years as well. And I think every one of our speakers today used it in their video as well. So it's off to a great start. So thank you. It's been fantastic to have you with us, David, and thank you for joining us while you're on vacation. That's fabulous as well. We really appreciate it. It's been terrific to talk also about different parts of your book that you've just released, but also what you talk about in your work every day. It's really added a great dimension to our session today. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And Leslie's got the book
I'm the electronic book reader.
Oh, right. Okay. So, as I said, we've certainly enjoyed the opportunity to bring the last two sessions to you. The recordings will be available on the IFLA website, but also then eventually all the videos. We have about a dozen videos of different leaders who've actually contributed their thoughts to responding to the question of what does the world today need from libraries? And of course, it's a conversation that we will need to continue to have, and actually, but also do something about as well, which is really, it's a call to action as well. So thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen, for all your work. Stephen does all the hard work in these sessions with the polls, the chat, and everything else like that. But thank you very much for joining us, and do check out the IFLA website for all the information as well. So thank you. And thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, and join us, those of you that'll be in Astana. You'll get to see some of the other videos. So there's a bit of a teaser here. And then, of course, we will be posting them, so they'll be available to everyone who's both in Astana and at a distance. And then we're going to be doing a virtual session to keep the momentum up early in the fall. So stay tuned.
Thank you.